Ingram, this is the Ingram Angle from Washington tonight. As always, thank you for joining us. Kamala's demeaning pitch to black men. That's the focus of tonight's angle. A 5-point plan including weed and money is how Kamala thinks she's going to win over the black voters that she's losing, but they're smarter than she thinks they are.
What would you say to the people that would consider the timing of this proposal as political timing?
So first of all, thank you for your question and for being here. I've been in this race about 70 days. You can look at all my work before those 70 days to know that what I'm talking about right now is not new and is not for the sake of winning this election.
Oh, okay. Now, many years ago, when I clerked for Justice Clarence Thomas, I learned that there is nothing that bothers liberals, I mean really bothers them more than minorities who think for themselves. And that means right now they are spinning over new data coming out about black views on Trump versus Harris.
The bottom line is this. At this particular hour, if you believe the polling, Donald Trump's going to put up the best performance with black voters since Richard Nixon back in 1960. Not 68, since 1960. That's 64 years ago. Now, he still only gets, what, 15% or so, the black vote, according to the New York Times poll. But that's a 67% improving of the support he got in 2020. And it's double what he got in 2016. That's called progress. But rather than try to figure out what Trump is saying, what he did previously that resonates, Kamala Harris recites lines written for her by her consultants. Nothing substantive, just trash talk.
Look at it in the context of how he actually thinks and talks about black folks in America. This man is dangerous. Not to mention, Roland, let's fast forward to right now. His staff won't let him do a 60 Minutes interview.
Now, hold the laughter. This from a woman who hid for most of the campaign and still hasn't held a press conference. Nice try. Now, according to Fox News Power Rankings, Kamala's decline among men, Hispanics, and black voters especially could be decisive factors in states like Pennsylvania and Arizona. Now, that's why Obama embarrassed himself last week lecturing black men. That's still my favorite thing of all last week, about how if they don't vote for Kamala, they'll be considered essentially just a bunch of idiot sexists. Well, that backfired big time. He also threatened to bring Michelle to lecture them. So how does Kamala win back black men? Now, with a serious plan, I imagine, to ditch Bidenomics and grow the economy so black men have the jobs that they deserve, or perhaps with a pledge to seal the border once and for all. No, of course not. Instead, she's dangling goodies that she knows she can never deliver on. She went on with Charlamagne the God this afternoon.
I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history. On the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that.
But wait, there's more. She says she's going to fight for 1 million forgivable loans to black entrepreneurs. Now, aside from the fact that that's totally unconstitutional, of course, that's never stopped them before. And if none of that works, she hopes that they're going to feel better about the crappy economy and dangerous streets if they at least know they can smoke weed and not be thrown in federal prison.
What public defenders who are around those days will tell you, I was the most progressive prosecutor in California on marijuana cases. And as vice president, have been a champion for bringing marijuana down on the schedule. So instead of it being ranked up there with heroin, we bring it down. And my pledge is, as president, I will work on decriminalizing it because I know exactly how those laws have been used to disproportionately impact certain populations and specifically black men.
Well, didn't she already do that when she was a prosecutor? Did she already throw a bunch of people in jail for weed? Well, she also added on her campaign website the typical gibberish about equity and price gouging on food and groceries. Yeah, that's the same recycled proposal that has been roundly ridiculed, even by Democrat economists. So this all smacks of unseriousness and, frankly, desperation. Now, Obama, again, acted like black men were misogynists for not supporting Kamala. And now Kamala is treating black men like they're too stupid to recognize a con artist when they see one.
As Barack Obama said, Kamala Harris has an issue with the brothers.
You texted me right around the Democratic convention, and you said, I am talking to people, and Kamala Harris has a problem with black men.
Yeah, and I told the campaign I did not hear from them. I mean, who am I for them to get back to me? But there's a problem. I went up to people just doing man on the street and said, who are you going to vote for? Black men. And time after time after time, they said, I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Kamala was supposed to be the pantsuit messiah, but she's really more of an actress.
When he was asked about what he was going to do, he says he's got concepts of a plan for how he'd replace it.
He has no plan to replace it. You guys watched the debate. Right. He has, quote, concepts of a plan. Concepts.
Kamala's imitating Barack, but there's one problem. She's more like Hillary, and the streets know it.
There's nothing about the poll numbers that we're seeing right now that should make anybody feel like she got this in the
Remember those poll numbers with Hillary?
Remember those poll numbers with Hillary? And I keep telling people this campaign feels more Hillary-ish than it does Obama-ish, Obama 08-ish.
When Hillary was in trouble with the black vote, Democrats closed their eyes and prayed for the God to save her. That's Charlamagne the God. But then Hillary pulled out the hot sauce.
What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Are you
getting information right now?
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce in my bag, Swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yes.
Now, listen, I just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to black people again.
Okay. Is it working?
Yeah.
No, seriously, hot sauce. I've been eating a lot of hot sauce, a lot of raw peppers and hot sauce.
Then Democrats tried it again. They sent Biden in, and he told them, you ain't black.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Oh. So Barack sent Harris to see the God, hoping the third time's a charm. Harris spent all day prepping for Charlamagne, cleared her whole schedule for one interview at 5 o'clock. The first question Charlamagne asked her, do you ever say anything new?
Well, what do you say to people who say you stay on the talking points?
I would say you're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, listen, here's the thing. I love having conversations, which is why I'm so happy to be with you this afternoon. And the reality is that there are certain things that must be repeated to ensure that I have everyone know what I stand for and the issues that I think are at stake in this election.
Mm-hmm.
And so it requires repetition. You know, some people say that until someone has heard the same thing at least 3 times, it just doesn't stay with you. So repetition is important.
Kamala thinks voters are too ignorant to get her message through their thick skulls. She has to repeat it like a hypnotist. And it's not even working because no one ever knows what she's talking about. This was kind of a virtual town hall with voters who called in, and they wanted to know, where's my money you promised?
My question to you is, what's your stance on reparations?
I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. As it relates to the economy, which is a lot of what you have addressed. Look, I grew up in the middle class. My mother, worked hard, raised me and my sister. And by the time I was in high school, she was able to afford our first home. I know what it means for an individual and a family to have home ownership.
Translation, you're not getting reparations. I want to give you reparations, but they told me I can't say that. What I can say is that I grew up in the middle class. Black men have been asking, how are you going to make my life better? Because my life was better under Trump. So Kamala, after 4 years of doing nothing, just came out with a plan for black men. Legalize weed and $20,000 welfare checks. That's right. Kamala wants to win the black vote with free money and drugs. But protecting black jobs is offensive, okay? Even black voters are a little suspicious.
I read that there is a new opportunity agenda, a plan for black men, which includes a proposal of forgivable loans up to $20,000 for 1 million black entrepreneurs. What would you say to the people that would consider the timing of this proposal as political timing?
I've been in this race about 70 days. You can look at all my work before those 70 days to know that what I'm talking about right now is not new and is not for the sake of winning this election. This is about a long-standing commitment, including the work that I've done as vice president and before when I was senator and before that.
Kamala has been in power for 4 years. Before that, she was a senator. Never proposed this before. And 3 weeks before the election, after struggling with the black vote, here's a check for 20 grand and a blunt. Did Kamala even come up with this pitch? Or did her white handlers sit around thinking, black people love handouts and getting high. Let's give this a shot. Democrats have been in charge of the White House for 12 of the last 16 years. And black Americans feel like they haven't done anything. One voter told the New York Times that they elected the first black president and we're still in the same place. Blacks are bailing on Democrats because of their policies. But Democrats are trying to reel them in with identity politics.
As it goes to black men, yes, we're out making the case that we have historically low unemployment, but we need to do more. Our message is solid. It's the right one for folks. And I think at the end of the day, they come back home.
Walz is guaranteeing it. They'll come back home. They always come back home. Who talks like that about people? They don't even try to earn the black vote. They scold, bribe, try to smoke them up. And if you don't come back home quick, they're going to send Don Lemon to chase you down.
Tough conversations are just that, tough. And people don't want to hear them. Sometimes people need to be chastised, right? You don't want your message to bounce off. I don't think that all the blame should be put on black men. But the black men that I have spoken to, and I continue to speak to on a daily basis, come up with these excuses and these reasons that are just inaccurate. They're just plain wrong. There are 3 excuses. 1 is misinformation, right? 2 is the media ecosystem, what media you're consuming. And 3 is that perhaps you are a misogynist.
Barack gave the media the green light to rough up black voters, and Don Lemon is coming in hot with an open hand. He has appointed himself the black vote enforcer. You can do this the easy way or the hard way, and Lemon prefers the hard way. MSNBC's bringing out the heavy guns. Joy Reid is going to snatch you up by the throat. And if you don't vote Democrat, you ain't black, you're sexist, and you're a fascist.
Have you noticed how sharply the polls have shifted in Trump's favor over the last couple weeks? With these claims that Trump is surging with black and Latino voters and leading in every single swing state, according to secret internal polls, despite all the Hitler talk. Yes, this race will be far too close. Because unfortunately, we do have a fascist groundswell in parts of this country, mainly among white men, let's be clear, but in small pockets among black and brown men, too. This happens to be a global phenomenon as women become more economically independent and seek positions of power.
Oh, my God. All right. So fascist, sexist, race traitor. What else are we missing here?
This election is going to be no different. They've already started with the misinformation and the lies. We know that there is foreign interference, and I have to say to everybody listening to this, don't let them take your voice. Because I was part of the Senate Intelligence Committee when we investigated Russia's interference in the 2016 election. Black folks were targeted with misinformation.
Ah, black men are sexist, fascist, Russian puppets. Got it. But white dudes for Harris, they're sexy. Don't you want to be sexy? And when all else fails, you go to Old Faithful. Scare them back home.
They can't stop blacks from voting anymore the way they did in the 60s with the same kind of success. What they want to do is they want to win the election night until the inauguration. And if they can go in and they can violently disrupt these counting centers, how will states be able to certify elections? You burn down a counting center in Arizona. How does a governor certify those elections? What world are we in then?
Democrats know their party can't function when people or groups think or act independently. The machine is designed to enforce blind loyalty and unquestioning faith. Persuasion, not part of the equation. Your edict is you're either with us 100% or we're going to make your life miserable. You swallow every hoax, follow every order, lie for us, and nod your head yes. Anything besides that, you have to go see Don and Joy in the dungeon. The Wall Street Journal frames Kamala's pitch to black voters as you're either a bad person or you're just stupid. Quote, are you an immoral, bigoted person? One of those notoriously misogynistic black men who can't stand uppity women, or a white racist who hates foreigners? Or are you a dupe easily misled by misinformation? When you don't like liberal ideas because you've seen the results, Democrats don't try to get better results. They just hate you for pointing out they're failing. See, loyal Democrats are supposed to pretend not to notice. Everyone else gets ridiculed into submission. In 2008, Obama called rural America bitter clingers. In 2016, Hillary called him a basket of deplorables. In 2020, Biden called you a threat to democracy. And now Democrats are calling their own voters, who they think they own, sexist Russian plants. But here's the catch. The media is amplifying the Democrats attacking their own side. Democrats expect to be criticized by Republicans, but not by other Democrats. It stings, especially after the Democrats have done very little for black America in the last decade, adding insult to injury. When the machine loses control, it can't operate. Everything needs to be clicking on all cylinders. It's not. Biden should have lost the election honorably, and the machine would have been able to regroup for the next cycle. But Democrats can't accept not being in power. And therefore, you had the coup and the Kamala coronation. Both acts of desperation have exposed the party's dark underbelly for the whole country to see, and is turning off more Democrats more than any Biden loss would have.
Welcome to Hannity. And tonight, Donald Trump has opened up a wide lead in the betting markets, bigger than I thought possible. Plus, Barstool founder Dave Portnoy is out with an epic takedown of Kamala Harris. And our own Harris Faulkner will join us with an exclusive preview of her town hall with former President Trump. That'll air tomorrow right here on the Fox News channel. But we begin with something different tonight. I want you to close your eyes for a second. Not deep meditation, maybe deep prayer if you want. But try to imagine something actually pretty horrible. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, this time next year, president and vice president in the White House. Because here's a preview of what life would be like in America, especially if they were to pass their very radical and extreme agenda, you know, like the Green New Deal. First, government spending and inflation will be worse than anything you have ever seen. Kamala has made a lot of promises with your money. This is interesting. That includes more than $1 trillion in so-called student loan forgiveness, $25,000 to first-time home buyers, and that is only the beginning. And then yesterday, because of the polls where she's lagging in terms of demographically African-American men in this country, she announced another $20 billion in forgivable loans to African-Americans to be handed out on the basis of race. And today, while speaking with Charlamagne the God, well, Kamala promised to consider a multi-trillion-dollar reparations plan. Take a listen.
I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. And I've been very clear about that position.
Now, she said this in the past. Nobody's ever asked her before. There is no amount of your money that Kamala will not spend to win a few votes. And, of course, the Harris campaign is also promising to sweeten the deal with a different kind of green, if you will. As the New York Post put it, quote, Kamala Harris urging African-American men to vote for her to legalize weed despite convicting herself 1,900 people as DA. And as we have reported from day one, Kamala Harris is the single most radical extreme candidate to ever run for president as a major party nominee. So expect to see a lot more stories like this one. Pay close attention. Transgender yacht killer serving a life sentence gets a taxpayer-funded sex change surgery thanks to Kamala Harris. This is not a made-up story. It is not AI-generated. It is not fake news. It is not a cheap fake. This murderer killed two grandparents on their boat by tying them to the vessel's anchor, throwing them overboard before, quote, grabbing a beer from the fridge and starting to fish. And according to court records, this was all part of an elaborate scheme to steal and launder enough money to pay for a sex change operation. And thanks to the policies set by Kamala Harris, she said it in her own words on tape, and we know she's out there taking this position for many years. During her time as California's AG, this killer's wish was in fact granted after murdering two people. According to a letter obtained by the Washington Free Beacon, this convicted killer claimed, quote, I did receive gender-affirming surgery and breast augmentation on April the 5th, 2023. Compliments of California taxpayers, of course. But not only has Kamala Harris supported taxpayer-funded sex change operations for inmates, but she also supports taxpayer-funded money going to sex change operations for the 12.5 million unvetted illegal immigrants from over 180 countries, many with terror ties, many with criminal backgrounds, many of our top geopolitical foes. This would be the very definition of madness. Never mind California, Minnesota, being okay with gender-affirming care for minors without parental consent. Have they ever heard of parental rights? And a brand new Trump campaign ad points this out. It is so insane, it's almost hard to believe, but it's real. Take a look.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
How about we just enforce the immigration laws and secure the border, and if you murder two people, you don't get a taxpayer-funded sex change operation? Seems pretty simple, seems pretty logical, right? Well, apparently it was just too difficult for the border czar, allowed these millions and millions of unvetted illegals into our country, including known terrorists, but we don't know where they are, and people that were known murderers. And look at all the dozens of Americans murdered, dozens of Americans, including children, raped, hundreds of Americans victims of violent crime. We have allowed gang members, drug cartels into the country. And as I said, people with terror ties from countries like Iran and Syria, Egypt, Afghanistan, Venezuela, China, and Russia. In Boston, ICE detained an illegal alien who was previously convicted of trafficking fentanyl, deported under Donald Trump. Guess what? He came right back into the country under Harris and Biden, was arrested for trafficking, more fentanyl, carjacking, and assault with a dangerous weapon. And right here in the free state of Florida, 3 Biden-Harris unvetted illegals, they were just arrested for sexually assaulting a child. They also crossed over from the wide-open southern border of your border czar, Kamala Harris. And if Kamala gets elected, this crisis, you can bet, will get worse. Border Patrol officers, they are now reportedly planning to quit in droves if Kamala wins. Look at these quotes from some of these people that work on the border in the New York Post. I'm not doing this bleep again. 4 years of hell, said one agent who's nowhere near retirement. Another agent saying lots of guys who can retire, they will go if Trump, and if Trump wins, they're going to stay. What does that say? They want the support of the American people to do the job they were hired to do. After all, what is the point of having a border patrol if there's no borders and they're wide open? Now, these are serious issues that are, frankly, national security issues at this point. If we have known terrorists in the country and murderers and rapists and other criminals and drug cartels and gang members, and the American people have every right to be worried about all of it. There should not be a single apartment complex, Martha Raddatz, not one taken over by Venezuelan gangs. And maybe somebody can help Martha do a little research and maybe ask Kamala Harris what she would say to the families of Lake and Riley and Rachel Morin, a mother of 5, and little 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungary, and the others murdered by alleged unvetted Harris-Biden illegals. There shouldn't be a single convicted killer, terrorist, or any such person in this country that is not vetted. There shouldn't be allowed into our country, let alone thousands. The American people deserve real solutions to the very real crisis that are impacting small towns and big cities across the country. Instead, the Harris campaign has been rolling out cheap gimmicks, taxpayer-funded. Well, where I grew up, they'd call it bribery, but I would never use that word. And Kamala's weird running mate, of course, assistant volunteer coach that claims to be the coach, Tim Walz. And after spending the weekend pretending to hunt pheasants with a shotgun that he was having a very hard time loading, well, today Tim Walz stepped up to the podium in a crisp new flannel shirt, accused J.D. Vance of faking his real life story. Take a look.
Senator Vance, he became a media darling. He wrote a book about the place he grew up, but the premise was trashing that place where he grew up rather than lifting it up. This guy's a venture capitalist cosplaying like he's a cowboy or something. I don't even know what a venture capitalist does most of the time, because folks who go to work every day, they're the ones that are saying, what are you going to do with the policies to make my life a little better?
You don't know what a venture capitalist does. You have no business being the vice president. Now, keep in mind, as a young man, Tim Walz spent a lot of time, well, gallivanting around communist China. And meanwhile, after growing up poor with a single mother, struggling with addiction, well, J.D. Vance, he enlisted in the U.S. Marines. He was deployed to Iraq. But unlike Tim Walz, he didn't lie about his rank. He didn't falsely claim valor that he didn't deserve and claim he fought in a war zone. He actually did. Vance used his service to help pay for college, ultimately law school at Yale. He was then successful in business, got into politics, and like so many other Americans, he is living the American dream, starting really at the bottom, which apparently makes Tim Walz very angry and jealous. And luckily, in 3 weeks, you can reject, and only you can reject. I'm only one vote. You can reject in Georgia, North Carolina, in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, in the great state of Nevada. You can reject the insane policies, the utter incompetence that Walz and Harris represent.
I know. It's never enough, is it? Happy Tuesday, everyone. Nancy Pelosi admitted she hasn't spoken to Joe Biden since helping to force him out of the race. To be fair, she can't find the Ouija board. It appears that Kamala Harris may actually do Joe Rogan's podcast. Her staff has already submitted a list of demands. They're Chardonnay, Pinot Grigio, Cabernet, Merlot, Xanax, Valium. Now, normally, Rogan's podcast can last up to 3 hours. 3 hours, you say? Wow, that gives me enough time to bang 8 nannies, said one man. Oh. Yeah. Kamala Harris is being accused of plagiarism for one of her books. Experts say you can tell Kamala didn't write it because it's called Smart on Crime. She allegedly lifted passages from a press release, an AP report, even Wikipedia. Wow, she's sounding more like Joe Biden every day, especially Chapter 4, which is about her uncle who was eaten by cannibals. Due to money issues, the Hillary Clinton-produced feminist musical Suffs will end its Broadway run in January. Also ending its run in January, Joe Biden. Fun fact, the title Suffs refers to the suffering of men who were dragged along to see this musical. A new study says the human nose can detect chemical changes in a fraction of a second. Yeah, just ask anyone in an elevator with Jerry Nadler. He farts a lot. We hope they're farts. And 2 giant pandas are on their way from China to the Smithsonian Zoo as part of a cultural exchange program. And because it's an exchange, we've sent them 2 hippos. I'll take it. All right. So last week, this is interesting, something called the California Coastal Commission rejected SpaceX request to launch more rockets from the Vandenberg Space Force Base, which is about 150 miles north of LA. The commission claims they're worried about the environmental impact and the sonic booms that ring out for hundreds of miles. After all, you wouldn't want to wake up those 180,000 homeless in their tents before noontime, would you? But launches like these have been done for the past 70 years, not to mention the other sonic booms they allow, like letting Eric Swalwell eat bean burritos from Taco Bell. But the commission's own words prove they're less worried about SpaceX environmental impact than Musk's social impact. Here's Chairwoman Carol Hart.
We're dealing with a company that does not, that is the head of which has aggressively injected himself into the presidential race.
See, what she should have said was, we're dealing with someone who's injected himself into the presidential race who isn't helping the Democrats. But see, that would be honest, the trait that most bureaucrats abhor. After all, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, the Soros Foundation funds left-wing DAs left and right, and Zuckerberg helped swing an election for Joe in 2020. See, they're not mad Musk's a political billionaire. They're mad he's not their political billionaire. Listen to Commissioner Mike. Oh, thank you. I'll take it. I know. Listen to Commissioner Mike Wilson.
This company is owned by the richest person in the world with direct control over what could be the most extensive global communication system on the planet. And just last week, that person was speaking about political retribution on a national stage, and it was very glib, but yet he was standing next to a candidate that openly promotes and is working to normalize that language.
Oh my goodness! Oh, you poor thing. Look, if you're mad at someone normalizing bizarre language, arrest Kamala. Every speech sounds like she's barfing up a word of the day desk calendar. Finally, check out this doozy from Commissioner Gretchen Newsom.
Right now, Elon Musk is hopping about the country, spewing and tweeting political falsehoods and attacking FEMA while claiming his desire to help the hurricane victims with free Starlink access to the internet.
Hopping? What, did he lose a leg? So this adorable creep is actually mocking Musk for helping disaster victims. What the has she done? Nothing. She's a bureaucrat. While she's shuffling papers, Musk delivered better internet access to North Carolina than public libraries have to horny homeless men, like Jamie Lissow. Now, do any of these bureaucrats really sound like they care about protecting wildlife? They wouldn't know the difference between a brown bear and a Brett bear. Actually, the only difference is one of them no longer in the woods. Now, the only thing they're really protecting is themselves. They're angry at Musk for not throwing his intellect and wealth behind their idiot Kamala, and they're abusing their power to punish him. Now, Musk is vowing to sue the commission for violating his First Amendment rights, claiming his words have nothing to do with his rocket launches, like Saturday's record breaker. That was a first. Nobody else in the history of the world has ever done that. Well, I once caught something shaped like a rocket, and boy, did the ER have a challenge removing that. Wasn't even July 4th. Fact is, Musk beat NASA with far less employees and cash, and he did it while also trying to cure disease, protect press freedom, and create an army of obedient robots. At least I hope they're obedient. When I say eliminate Ducey, I don't want an argument. Musk is changing the world, and these bureaucrats think they can get him to shut up. They can't, and that drives him crazy because he embraces the call for adventure, which is the complete opposite of a bureaucrat. A bureaucrat exists purely to seek comfort, building a padded world around him without achieving a thing. Once a bureaucrat is born, its only goal is to feather its nest before it dies. But Musk is the enemy of comfort, which is weird for a billionaire. In fact, it makes being a billionaire the least interesting thing about him. He realizes that becoming comfortable with life makes you a menace to everyone else, because when you have no challenges, you use that time to infringe on others, like a bureaucrat. Do bureaucrats ever learn from failure? No. They avoid failure by avoiding everything worthwhile. So when they see someone who chases a challenge, they resent him. They've given up on their dreams, so they expect you to do the same. See, for Musk, it's about failure more than success. Failure becomes the next challenge, which becomes the next opportunity, which leads to wisdom. Compare that to those who despise him. They say it's over political beliefs, but it's far deeper. They don't have faith in themselves, and they hate those who do. Now, they could be inspired by him, but it's just easier to envy him and become an obstacle to the achievement of others. But look, you don't need to agree with his opinions. It's a free country. You have the right to talk back to him or anybody else. But when you try to stifle scientific progress because you hate a candidate, you're not the good guys. Maybe it should be you that we're launching into space. You know, California might look pretty good from up there. Let's welcome.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.